Well, welcome back to these series of lectures. In the last lecture, which was delivered on this particular rubric, we dealt with one of the controversies uh, during the reign of Jahangir, and that is the uh, crisis at the time of Jahangir's accession. Whether at that particular moment of time when Jahangir succeeded to the throne of Akbar, whether uh, there was a shift in the state policy towards religion, did Jahangir actually do away with the policy of Sulhekul of Akbar, his father, and initiated a policy where emphasis was on Islam under the influence of Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi. That was the topic on which we had held discussions or had a talk in the previous lecture. Today, let us go further and see what actually happened after Jahangir became the emperor and succeeded his father. As I told you before, that one of the basic works which has been done on this particular theme is by Professor M. Athar Ali. Now, in one of his articles, M. Athar Ali very explicitly tries to point out that when uh, the accession took place and when he started his reign, at the moment soon after coming to the throne, he introduces himself in the Tuzuk, his self account, his autobiography, Tuzuk Jahangiri. Jahangir, in fact, fails to mention one part of his name. All of us know that his full name was Nuruddin Muhammad Jahangir. But while introducing himself in the Tuzuk, uh, Jahangir simply forgets to mention Muhammad. He mentions his name as Nuruddin Jahangir. Uh, Now, Ahmad Harali, with this uh, rather surprising exclusion of his name, of his own name, reaches a conclusion that possibly because, uh, just like his father, uh, Jahangir was not interested to show off his Islamic faith. Remember that we had pointed out that Abul Fazl, throughout the Akbarnama, never mentions Islam as such. He calls it as Keshe Muhammadi. So probably it was in the same spirit that M. Athar Ali says that Jahangir, after becoming the king, when he writes his account, he fails to mention one part of his name and mentions himself only as Nuruddin Jahangir. Not only that, but then M. Athar Ali goes forward in this article of his and discusses the famous 12 edicts which were issued by Jahangir at the time of his accession. Now, naturally, these 12 edicts are sort of assurances or reassurances which are given by Jahangir to his nobility. Among these assurances, among these 12 edicts which Jahangir issues, there is this particular edict mentioned at number 10. One can say edict number 10, in which Jahangir says that during his reign, no slaughter of animals would be allowed on his own birthday and the date of birth of his father. A concession being given to the non Muslim thought, the practice of the non Muslims of being vegetarians. So here we find Jahangir claiming that there would be 2 days on which no meat would be served at all. Uh, his own birthday and the day on which Emperor Akbar, his father, had been born. Abstention from, in fact, the eating of beef and meat was given on 2 days in a week. Thursday. Thursday was the day on which Akbar had been born, and Sunday. And on both these days, what to talk about beef, even fish was not allowed to be eaten. Likewise, there was a prohibition on the slaughter of peacocks. Further, Jahangir ordained that there would be no compulsion or no force as far as the exercise of any of the customs of the people were concerned. The only exception to the customary practices of the people would be sati. Apart from sati, there would be no prohibition of any type of customs which the people were following in his kingdom. He also went on to claim that as God's grace was on everyone, God's grace extended to all. In the similar fashion, his munificence, the king's munificence, is meant for the all. He would give equal treatment irrespective of the religion to which the people belonged. Now, Atharali says that if you read Tuzuk, you would find that Jahangir also provides a reason for this. There is a cause why he says that he would not discriminate between people. And that is a very interesting thing which occurs in the Tuzuk. He says the reason which he gives for this equal treatment for all is that 5/6 of all the people in the empire were Hindus. Thus, they were in such a majority that it was almost impossible to do anything against them. Now, if you believe this reason, then it has something which is not part of the policy of Sulhul Akbar. It is not tolerance. Abstaining from beef is tolerance. Allowing cultural practices of all is tolerance. But the reason which he gives, that I am tolerating because they are in such a brute majority that I can't do anything against them. 5/6 of the population. And this is something which shows his majburi. And thus it is, according to Athar Ali, a divergence from the ideals of his father, Akbar. Now, if you look at the reign of Jahangir, Jahangir tried to follow a number of precepts of his father. For example, the translation work, which was a part of the policy of Solekul, appears to have continued. But this work of translation was at a very low level, downscaled. It was downscaled. Not as many texts were translated during the period of Jahangir as were under Akbar. For example, there was a text known as Dwadasa Bhav. It is a Sanskrit work which is now lost. But during the period when he was yet a prince, that was, translated at Allahabad. Similarly, Yoga Vashisht. It was rendered into Persian in 1597 and it was presented to him. So there are a number of texts which were translated. The policy of translating the texts from the period of Akbar continued, but not as many texts and not the type of texts which had been translated earlier were continued under Jahangir. Yoga Vashisht, as you may have understood, is a dialogue between Ram and Vashisht. That was one of the important texts which we find translated in the post-Akbar period. Apart from that, we also know that Jahangir started having relationship with a number of yogis, a policy which was of Akbar himself. Among the yogis, one of the major important ones is supposed to be a person whose name is Jadrup Gosai. He is variously pronounced as Chitrup. Now, there is a paper written by Professor Shirin Muswi on this particular aspect on Chitrup or Jadrup Gosain. The paper is entitled The Mughal Encounter with Vedant, recovering the biography of Jadrup, which was presented to the Indian History Congress. It's published in the Proceedings of the Indian History Congress in the year 2000-2001. Now, according to Emma Thoroughly, whom Professor Shirin Muswi cites, Jadrup possibly was the same Chitrup who has been mentioned by the author of Dabistane Mazahib. It appears that if you believe the author of Dabistane Mazahib, then Chitrup or Jadrup, the Jogi, the Gosain, in fact, came into contact first with Akbar. If you read the Akbarnama, you would find that in the end of a list which has been provided by Abul Fazl, and this list is of those who Abul Fazl calls as Khudawand-e Batin, the masters of the spirit. Khudawand-e Batin, the people who believed in the spirit, not the word. Mystics, you can say. Those who were the mystics. It is in this list, at the fag end of this list, you find the mention of Jadrup. Uh, there may be two opinions why Jatrup was mentioned at the very fag end of the list. One, that probably during the period of Akbar, Jadrup was a very minor yogi, not very important. तो उनका भी हवाला दे दिया गया लेकिन आखिर में. But according to Emma Thoroughly, probably his reference comes during the end because Akbar came into contact with him only in 1601, just before Abul Fazl's death. You know that Abul Fazl stopped writing the Akbarnama in 1602 when he died. So it was at the fag end while he was completing his work. It was only then that Akbar became aware or came into contact with Jadrup, and that is one of the reasons why Abul Fazl mentions this name only at the end and doesn't give many details of this person. But under Jahangir, this Jadrup, who, according to Atharali, is Chitrup, mentioned in Dabistani Mazahib, the same person, the same saint, who is given much prominence in the Dabistani Mazahib. Under Jahangir, it appears that he gained much prominence. And it is from Jadrup that Jahangir comes to learn much of the Vedantic philosophy, which Jahangir is famous for. In fact, the Vedanta under Jahangir, under the influence of Jadrup Gosain, was pushed to a central position. The way that Jahangir mentions Vedanta, it appears that according to Jahangir, the Vedantic philosophy was nothing but tasawwuf, mysticism. In fact, in Tuzuk he writes, there is a sentence which I'll read out in English to you. Vedant is the ilme tasawwuf, is the science of mysticism. In other words, Vedant or Vedantic philosophy, according to Jahangir, was nothing but pantheism. The same pantheistic thought, the same tasawwuf, the same type of philosophy which was followed by Shankaracharya. And there was no difference between the tasawwuf having its Upanishadic Vedantic origins and that as followed by the mystics of Islam. They were both akin, they were all together. In fact, another author of Jahangir's reign, Motamad Khan, he says that Imroz, that is today, the science of Vedant is taken to be nothing but tasawwuf. Very specifically he mentions the same thing which Jahangir has written in his Tuzuk. Now all this happened probably under the influence of Jadrup Gosain, with whom we are informed that Jahangir had a number of discussions at various periods of time. In fact, Jahangir is said to have visited the cave of Jadrub on a number of occasions where he held religious discussions, serious discussions with Jadrub Gosain on various aspects which interested him. Uh, Motabat Khan goes to the extent that Jadrub became so important for Jahangir that it was at the intercession of Jadrub Gosain that ultimately at the time when Khosrow had revolted, in fact, Khosrow was pardoned, his life was pardoned at the advice of Jadrub himself. So you can imagine the type of influence with which this yogi was having over Jahangir. In spite of these contacts between the yogis, the mystics of the Upanishadic traditions, we find that there are a number of episodes during the reign of Jahangir where some type of religious persecution has been alleged. I would not say that there was religious persecution at some level. I won't go to that extent. But there was perceived to be some religious persecution being carried out during the reign of Jahangir, uh, which sometimes is very much highlighted by the textbook writers who deal with the reign of Jahangir. Now, for example, who does not know about the execution of Guru Arjan? As you know that Guru Arjan is one of the Sikh gurus. In fact, the fifth guru of the Sikh community. And it is alleged that Jahangir, in a way, in a form of religious persecution, had him executed. Unfortunately, I mean, Jahangir, in spite of the fact that he keeps on claiming that he is following the policies of his father, in spite of the fact that he himself was born out of a Hindu mother, having relations with the Rajputs like anything. There are various communities which keep on accusing him. For example, as I said, the Sikh community. If you go to the Golden Temple, there is a museum out there, and you would find mention that there are a number of murals which are given on the walls of the Golden Temple, where you would find that Jahangir is supposed to be one of the persecutors of Sikhism. He's looked down upon by Sikhs like anything. He being accused of having killed Guru Arjan. Similarly, if you go to the Jain community, they would also, blame Jahangir for having dealt very harshly with the community during his reign. The Shias, they blame Jahangir to have been a very strict Sunni who persecuted the Shias. In fact, they blame that Jahangir got Qazi Nurullah Shustari, one of the Shia divines, executed. So we find that whether it is the so-called heretical sects of Islam or various communities of the non-Muslims, There is some misgiving which is there between them and Jahangir, in spite of his own claims that he was trying to follow the same policy, in spite of his 12 edicts, where he says that each and every religion's customs would be allowed, so on and so forth. We find that there is some problems which occurred during this period. Uh, the execution of, or the death of uh, Guru Arjan took place soon after Jahangir's accession in 1606. Uh, if you read Tuzuk, there is a particular line regarding Guru Arjan which Jahangir writes that Guru Arjan has opened a dukan of falsehood, a shop of falsehood, uh, which uh, is making both Hindus and Muslims fools. He's trying to mislead both the Hindus and the Muslims. ये एक ऐसी दुकान खोले हुए हैं कि जिससे हिंदू और मुसलमान दोनों को नुकसान पहुंचे. And this sentence is picked out to show the religious discrimination, the intolerance of Jahangir towards the Sikhs. Now, Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, whom we had mentioned during the course of earlier lectures, the person who claimed himself to be the reformer of the age, Imam Rabbani, Mujaddid al-Fasani, who has left behind two collections of letters known as Maktubat Imam Rabbani, which are in 2 volumes. There, if you read what Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi has to say regarding Guru Arjan, he says that Guru Arjan was in fact executed by Jahangir in order to punish and defeat the Hindus. It was a form of a reprobation of the Hindu community. जो जहांगीर ने शेख इनको गुरु अर्जन को जो एग्जीक्यूट करवाया था, वो हिंदुओं को सबक सिखाने के लिए, नॉन मुस्लिम्स को सबक सिखाने के लिए. Remember that the term Hindu is being used for the non-Muslims. So it was a reprobation of the faith of the non-Muslims, which was done by Jahangir in the form of execution of Guru Arjan, according to Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi in one of his letters. He goes on to claim that it was a humiliation of the Kafirs, which Jahangir did. In fact, he lauds Jahangir. And I mentioned to you earlier that Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi mentions Jahangir as the Badshah Islam. तो जाहिर है बादशाह इस्लाम है, तो काफिरों के खिलाफ स्टेप ले रहे हैं. और one of the examples which is provided by Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi is the so-called execution of Guru Arjan. But then, if you read certain other sources of Jahangir's period and some other later sources, the picture appears to be a little different. For example, the author of Dabistani Mazahib. Now, who was the author of the Dabistani Mazahib? In fact, the author of Dabistani Mazahib throughout the Dabistan does not mention his name at all. So he is variously identified. Sometimes, to be on a safer side, we say that Dabistan and Mazahib has been written by an unknown author, anonymous, because we don't know actually who this person was. But according to some, he can be identified as Mobid, one of the Zoroastrian priests. According to others, his name was Mohsin Fani. There are several other, interpretations as to who he was. In one of the, very recent, interpretations, uh, Dr. Karim Najafi, who was the cultural counselor of Iran at Delhi, he had also written and tried to identify on the basis of a manuscript of the Bistari Mazahib, which he has edited, and tried to identify and give a name to this particular person. Now, whatever his name was, whether he was Mohsen Fani or Mobid or whatever name you try to take, he has a particular take on, incidentally, this author, about whose name we are not very sure, was a friend or a very good acquaintance of the son of Guru Arjan. They had, very good relations with each other. So he was in the know. गुरु अर्जन के जो बेटे थे उनसे इनकी बड़ी खास जान पहचान थी, उनको वो साइड भी करते हैं. So he was close to the family of the person who had been executed. And the author of Dabistan does not say that Jahangir had him executed at all on the basis of religious discrimination. What he says is that action was taken against Guru Arjan because of the fact that the Guru had given his blessings to Prince Khusro at the time when he revolted against Jahangir. And it was a result of this type of, revolt by the son against the father. And because the son was supported, given some monetary assistance and blessings by Guru Arjan, it was a result of that ultimately, after the revolt had been suppressed, when others were given punishment, when Khusro himself was given a punishment, it was at that time that Guru Arjan, who had supported Khusro, was also punished. Now there is another account. The Jesuit accounts also mention what happened to the Sikh Guru. They point out that when Guru Arjan was arrested on the charges of supporting Khusro, when he revolted against his father, Jahangir, it was decided that he should be fined. A heavy sum was fixed as a fine on Guru Arjan, that either he should pay it or face the punishment. And there was one of the former, disciples of the Guru, Pirthia, who took the surety and promised Jahangir that I am making you the payment, you release. And so, in fact, Jahangir had Jahangir handed over Guru Arjan to Prithia, who had been a former disciple to Guru Arjan. Now, after Prithia took hold of Guru Arjan and wanted Guru Arjan to repay him the amount of 2 lakhs which he had paid to the state, the Guru refused to do so, or did not have the money to do so, or whatever differences arose between the former disciple and the Guru. Prithia detained Guru Arjan. He was confined at a place where he was exposed to the extreme heat of the sun. He was tortured by another person who also had been one of the followers of Guru Arjan, Chandu. And it was during that torture, to get back the money which Prithia had paid to the state, Guru Arjan died. So if you read one account of Sheikh Ahmad, according to that, Guru Arjan was punished by Jahangir on the basis of his religion. But if you read the author of the Bistane Mazahib and if you read the Jesuit accounts, there's a different story altogether. It appears that the religion of the Sikhs was not an issue. We should also, as historians, not forget that till this time there was no sect known as Sikhs. The Sikhs came to as a religious group, as a religious entity, came to be established only after the 10th Guru, that is during the period of Aurangzeb and later Mughals. During this period, they are just a form of a mystical group, Nanak Panthis, and the Sikhism as such does not exist at all. Similarly, if you try to analyze what happened between Jahangir and the Jains, there also the story appears to be quite complex. We know that there were a large number of Jains in the region of Ahmedabad, Gujarat. They were known as Seorah, Seorah, Seorah Jain monks. It was a particular sect of the Jains, bhikshus who were there. And it is said that these Seorah Jains, they had collaborated with the merchants, the Banyas and Bakkals, and caused mischief, economic mischief. And thus, an order was given banishing them from the region of Ahmedabad. However, soon afterwards, this farman was withdrawn, but the loss of the Jain community had already been done. Now, whether the discrimination against these Jain bhikshus, the Seorah Jains of Ahmedabad, can be taken to be a punishment for their economic crimes or a sort of a religious punishment is not very clear. What, however, we know is the fact that there are two Jain inscriptions, one of 1618 and the other of 1626, and both after these Seora Jains had been punished. And in both these inscriptions, in fact, Jahangir, Emperor Jahangir, is extolled like anything. He is praised, and we find that in fact the community as such, the Jains as such, the religious community as such, there was no blood lost between them and Jahangir. Uh, so we find that whether it was the case of Guru Arjan or that of the Jains of Ahmedabad, there was some, a complexity which is involved. It is not very simple to just go on and say that both these acts were in fact religious persecutions. There is another fact which one has to remember. Now, both these, whether it was Guru Arjan or it was the Jain community, both of them are in fact the so-called Hindu communities. Dabistan Mazahib in fact goes on to inform us that Jahangir in fact had appointed a person, Srikant Kashmiri, a Hindu, Srikant Kashmiri, as the legal authority of the Hindu community, the Qazi of the Hindus, who would look after the legal aspects of the Hindu community. Remember also that the ban on cow slaughter, the ban on animal slaughter on certain days, these acts continued throughout the reign of Jahangir. ये इसमें ऐसा नहीं हुआ था कि कभी किसी पीरियड में उसको उन्होंने जारी कर दिया हो, कभी उसको अलाउ कर दिया हो, कभी बंद कर दिया. No, both these things were together, and we also come to know for the first time that a Qazi, a separate Qazi who was himself a Hindu, was appointed for the Hindus, a separate one. Let us now come to another issue of Jahangir's period, which is very, very controversial. The execution of Qazi Nurullah Shustari. Qazi Nurullah Shustari is supposed to be a Shia divine, one of the, very important Shia theologians who had migrated to the Mughal Empire from Iran. Qazi Nurullah had come to India around 1585, at a time when Akbar was still at Fatehpur Sikri. And after coming here, he had been appointed as the Qazi-e-Lashkar, as the Qazi of Lahore. He had also been given the charge of scrutinizing the Madad-e-Mash, Siurgal, and other type of grants in the region of Kashmir. A person who had written a number of works while in India during the reign of Akbar. We have discussed it while we were discussing the religious policy of Akbar. Qazi Nurullah has also had written a number of letters, exchanged a number of letters with certain theologians of the period. Some of these letters are in Hyderabad, Salarjung Museum. There are certain letters of Qazi Nurullah Shustari which survive in Khudabakhsh Library. There are a number of letters which are part of a manuscript which is preserved at Maulana Azad Library. There are a number of letters which were written to Qazi Nurullah Shustari by some of the Iranian nobles, for example, Hakim Ali Gilani, which survive, which were written not by Qazi Nurullah, but were written by Hakim Ali and his brothers to Qazi Nurullah. They survive. The work which Qazi Nurullah did, Majalisul Mominin, that survives. Iqaqul Haq, a book, a polemical work which he had done, that survives. Mullah Abdul Qadir Badayuni. In fact, there is a whole passage on Qazi Nurullah Shustari, which Badayuni includes in his Muntakhabut Tawarikh. I told you in one of the earlier lectures about it, that there's a whole paragraph in the praise of Qazi Nurullah about his knowledge, about his judgments, about his justice, how the Qazi would give judgments after having consulted and taken into account all the four schools of jurisprudence of the Sunnis, Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, etc. Mullah Abdul Qadir Badayuni very well mentions this. And in the end, while he ends his account of Qazi Nurullah Shustari, after praising him, on the whole page, the last sentence which he writes is Wale ke Shia-Abud. In spite of every goodness which he had, he was a Shia. So he was a well-known Shia of that period, who was also respected by everyone. He was a person who had written in his letters to his contemporaries that Akbar is a just king. The reign of Akbar is a reign where hiding one's faith is not at all necessary, and it is binding on the Shia community that they should follow their faith openly, because the ruler is a very just ruler. He is Badshah Adil, according to Qazi Nurullah Shustari. Now, the same Qazi Nurullah Shustari, after the death of Akbar, appears now to be hounded during the reign of Jahangir. And if you read the hagiographical accounts written by the Shias and others, not only by the Shias but also by the followers of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi, it is alleged that he was executed because of his Shia. All the other followers of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi, Sheikh Ikram is one of the modern historians of Pakistan, who has written Aab-e Kausar, Rood-e Kausar, etc., etc. Again, we have discussed in the first lecture on Jahangir. He writes that it was under the influence of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi that this Rafizi, because of his riffs, because of his Shiism, was executed by Jahangir. The Shias also, as I said, they believe that Jahangir executed Qazi Nurullah Shustari on the basis of his faith. You know, one of the first biographies of Qazi Nurullah Shustari, which was compiled by my father, Tazkirah Majid. It is in Urdu. It's the perspective which reflects the perspective of the Indian Shias. And there, Jahangir is blamed for the execution of Qazi Nurullah Shustari, and it is said कि क्योंकि वो शिया थे और इसीलिए काजी नूरुल्लाह शूस्तरी को जो इंडियन शियाज हैं, why to say Indian Shias, the Shias in general, whether in Iran or in India, they call him as Shaheed Salis, the third great martyr. In fact, the third great martyr among the non-imams who were executed on the basis of their faith. एक तो अहले बैत के खानदान उस घराने के लोग हैं, जो 12 इमाम हैं, उनमें से 12वां तो जिंदा है, लेकिन बाकी सब जो थे वो कोई ना कोई कैसे कैसे एग्जीक्यूट हुए. लेकिन अगर उनको अहले बैत को छोड़ दिया जाए तो उनमें जो बड़े बड़े उलमा गुजरे हैं, उनमें वन ऑफ द प्रोमिनेंट फिगर्स, द थर्ड शहीद who is counted, Shaheed Salis. That is the status which is given to Qazi Nurullah Shustari by the Shias as he was executed by a Sunni king. Let us also see whether this type of an accusation, and as I said, that one of the prominent persons who puts up this accusation is my father himself, who wrote the first biography of Qazi Nurullah Shustari, his book Tazkirah Majid. Apart from that, we have certain works, important works on Qazi Nurullah Shustari in English. For example, there is a work which has been done by Wayne R. Husted, W-A-Y-N, Wayne Husted, H-U-S-T-E-D. He was an American scholar who did his PhD from Jamia, and he wrote a thesis on the popular perceptions of Shaheed Salis. He did not go into the historicity of the fact. He just took up looked at this figure from the point of view of popular history. What is the popular belief? So once again, this execution of, because he is a Shia, is highlighted in this work of Wayne Husted. Athar Abbas Rizvi, one of the most celebrated authors of medieval Indian history, Sayyid Athar Abbas Rizvi, who was initially at Aligarh and then went to Canberra. He has written a voluminous 2-volume work on the intellectual Isna Ashari Shias of India. In fact, that is one of the most respectable history of the Shiism in India. In the volume 1, he devotes a full chapter on Qazi Nurullah Shustari, and he borrows the account of my father, Sayyid Sibtul Hasan, the work which he had done in Tazkirah Majid, with some historical rigor and in much more a little more detail. My father was a theologian. Sayyid Athar Abbas Rizvi was, a historian. So the same material, the same sources which had been introduced by my father are now treated by Sayyid Athar Abbas Rizvi in a very professional manner, and he comes out with a very detailed account about the execution of Qazi Nurullah Shustari in his book, Volume 1 of Intellectual Isnasharis of India. One of the last writers I would mention is one of my, friends, acquaintances, who teaches in the University of Exeter, Professor Sajjad Rizvi. He has also written a paper which was published in the People's History Journal, edited by Irfan Habib, one of the issues where the execution of Qazi Nurullah Shustari and his views are taken into account. So these are some of the works. And of course, among the traditional writers, how can you miss Shri Ram Sharma, S.R. Sharma, the religious policy of the Mughals. In fact, if we start with this account of whether the execution of Qazi Nurullah was on the basis of sectarian differences or not, the first historian to be quoted would naturally be S.R. Sharma, because he is one of the earliest writers on this topic. In fact, he writes that Qazi Nurullah Shustari's polemical works, for example, his work known as Ihqaqul Haq, which he had written against the Sunni polemical works which were circulating during that period of time, and his magnum opus, Majalisul Momineen, an account of the Shias of that period, they became the cause of the execution of Qazi Nurullah Shustari. And it was on the basis of, especially Ihqaqul Haq, the way he had, written against the Sunnis, countered the Sunni point of view, that Jahangir was forced to take action. And again, one of the main points is that it was under the influence of Sheikh Ahmad Sirindi that Jahangir acted against. Remember that the argument was that Qazi Nurullah Shustari was executed in 1610, 1 year before the marriage of Nur Jahan Begum with Jahangir. तो अभी जो नूरजहां जुनता जो है, एतबातुद्दौला और आसफ खान और जो शिया इन्फ्लुएंस इन दी कोर्ट है, that is still, according to these traditional authors, this is missing, and it is under the influence of the Sunni Islam that Qazi Nurullah Shustari was executed by Jahangir. Emma Thoroughly, one of my teachers, who in fact also mentions this episode in a number of his articles which he has written. But more than what he has written, he used to discuss this issue in the class while he would be teaching us this course. And according to him, he said that, and he wrote it in a number of his articles, this fact also, that actually there is hardly any contemporary reference to the execution of Qazi Nurullah Shustari. कोई सोर्स नहीं बताता कि काजी नूरुल्लाह शूस्तरी का एग्जीक्यूशन जहांगीर के कहने पे हुआ था या मजहब की वजह से हुआ था. And if it was, then it was on the basis of his taqiyya. तो जो हुआ था वो इसलिए हुआ था क्योंकि ये तक़य्या करते थे. He used to hide his faith And he would, being a Shia, he would give judgments on the basis of Shia fiqh, although he should have given judgments on the basis of the Maliki or Hanbali or Shafi'i or Hanafi law. And once it was reported against him that he is giving judgments on the basis of the Shia fiqh, which is not recognized, and because of the polemical nature of the works which he had done, Jahangir was forced to execute. This is what the opinion of Professor M. Atharli was. Let us, before going a little further, let us look at whether there some mention in the contemporary sources or not. Now, one of the first sources, which is contemporary, which in fact belongs to the period, is Zakhiratul Khawanin. Zakhiratul Khawanin, compiled by Sheikh Farid Bhakkari. Now, Sheikh Farid Bhakkari writes this 3-volume work, which is in the nature of being a dictionary of the Mughal nobles. He completed it during the reign of Shah Jahan, but was very much alive at the time when this execution allegedly took place. And if you read the Zakhiratul Khawanin, he mentions Dar Ghazabe Jahangiri Kushte Shud. Qazi Nurullah was executed because of the furor of ghazab of Jahangir. He doesn't give any reason. He doesn't write that what was the reason, whether it was the taqiyya, whether it was the writing of polemical works against the Sunnis, whether it was the fact that Qazi Nurullah was a Shia divine serving the cause of the Shias against the Sunnis, or whether he made certain other mistakes. Nothing has been mentioned. It is only that the emperor was furious with him, and it was as a result of his anger that Qazi Nurullah was executed. Now, there is another source dating back from the Jahangir's period. Arafatul Ashiqeen. Arafatul Ashiqeen is a manuscript compiled by Taqiyuddin Ohadi. The manuscript is in Khuda Bakhsh Library, in Maulana Azad Library, Aligarh. And Taqiyuddin Ohadi mentions that Qazi Nurullah was executed with the wounds of a mace through the durra. A mace. He was hit by a mace on the orders of Jahangir, and he died. He was a contemporary of Jahangir and Qazi Nurullah. In fact, he was an acquaintance of Qazi Nurullah. He was a very close acquaintance of Qazi Nurullah's son. He knew the family. And he writes that it was due to the fact that he was hit by a durra, by a mace, that the death of Qazi Nurullah. But once again, the cause, whether it was on the basis of his religion, hiding of the faith, writing against the Sunnis, working for the Shias, nothing of that sort is mentioned. Then there is a lesser known work of Motamad Khan. Mu'tamad Khan has written a book known as Tarikh-e-Ain Muhammadi. And in this manuscript, Tarikh-e-Ain Muhammadi, which is preserved in the Raza Library, Rampur, Mu'tamad Khan wrote this during the reign of Aurangzeb, that he writes that Qazi Nurullah Shustari was executed by Adur-Rai Khardar, a spied mace, and he was killed. Now, for the first time, the mention is made that he was killed because he had written such works as Majalisul Mu'mineen, Ihqaqul Haq, and so on and so forth. In other words, because of his religious beliefs. जहांगीर के पीरियड में कोई सोर्स ऐसा नहीं है जो एग्जीक्यूशन के बाद ये कह रहा हो कि मजहब की बेसिस पे ये किए गए थे. शाहजहां के पीरियड में भी कोई ऐसा सोर्स नहीं है जो ये मेंशन कर रहा हो कि ये रिलीजियस बेसिस पे. हाँ, एक सोर्स औरंगजेब के पीरियड का जरूर है, मोहम्मद खान का, तारीख आइन मोहम्मदी, जहां के ऊपर इनके मजहब को इंट्रोड्यूस किया जाता है और कहा जाता है. Remember that during this period there are a number of Shia historians, but none of them mention whether the execution of Qazi Nurullah was on the basis of religion or not. I must remind you once again that the way Mullah Abdul Qadir Badayuni mentions Qazi Nurullah, जो मैंने पूरा आपको डिटेल में बताया था, it's very very clear that his faith was known. It could never have been on the basis of his taqiyya. ये कहना कि तक़य्या किए हुए थे, फैसला जो थे वो फ़िक़्ह जाफ़री पे, शिया शरीयत के बेसिस पे देते थे, जबकि सुन्नियों को सुनाया जाता था. He was a known Shia. There was nothing to be hidden about. He himself had written a number of communications where he wrote to the other Shias कि ये तक़य्ये का वक्त नहीं है. One should profess his faith openly. So there is no point in having to believe whether it was because of his polemical writings or not. Yes, there may be, because that remains unsaid why he was executed. There are other sources now from Aurangzeb's period and in the later Mughal period, Miratul Alam, Bakhtawar Khan, etc., etc., which now keep on mentioning that the execution was on the basis of, his faith. Now, what should we conclude? Now, very recently, a new source for Jahangir's period was discovered. Majalis-e-Jahangiri. I have mentioned this. I mentioned that Majalis-e-Jahangiri account of the nightly discussions which took place, religious discussions which took place on certain nights of Jahangir's period. They are, noted down, and this new source has been discovered, on which Corinne Lefebvre, Shirin Musfi, Sanjay Subramaniam, and others, they have in fact written. Now here in Majalis-e-Jahangiri, there is one interesting information. Now this source also does not discuss why Qazi Nurullah was executed. But there is one sentence of Jahangir which is given in the context of Qazi Nurullah. Jahangir says in this text, the quotation goes like this, that people accuse me that I punished Qazi Nurullah Shustari on the basis of his religion. I deny it. ये जो एक्यूजिशन है कि मैंने काजी नूरुल्लाह को इसलिए मरवाया क्योंकि वो शिया थे, मैं उससे इनकार करता हूं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं था. This is just an accusation. Now, whether Jahangir is speaking the truth or not, whether one should conclude कि अब तो कह दिया जहांगीर ने कि मैंने नहीं मरवाया था. My reading of this is that at least this perception that some sort of religious discrimination had been done against Qazi Nurullah Shustari prevailed even during the contemporary period when this execution had taken place. Remember, I told you that the Majalisul Mu'minin, ये जो है, ये जो अकाउंट है, ये 1618 में खत्म हो जाता है. 1610 में एग्जीक्यूशन हुआ था. ये एग्जीक्यूशन के 8 इयर्स के अंदर अंदर का डिस्कशन है, जिसमें जहांगीर कह रहा है कि जो मेरे लिए कहा जा रहा है वो गलत है, मैंने नहीं किया था. He is saying that at a time when E'timaduddaulah, Noor Jahan, Asaf Khan, and a host of other Irani nobles are well entrenched in the court. Is he denying this charge in order to, satisfy them? Or is it a fact that no religious discrimination had taken place? चाहे हुआ था या नहीं हुआ था, लेकिन परसेप्शन था. गुरु अर्जन को पृथिया ने मारा था, वो धूप में खड़े होके सनस्ट्रोक से मर गए थे. जहांगीर ने नहीं मारा था. That is no justification. Guru Arjan was executed during the reign of Jahangir. So was the case with Qazi Nurullah Shustari. Whether the primary intention of Jahangir, my personal view is that in 1610 was a time when now almost all those nobles who had been supporting Qazi Nurullah Shustari, Hakim Ali Gilani, Hakim Abul Fath, and a host of others, Fatehullah Shirazi, Faizi, Abul Fazl, all this clique of nobles who had been, supporting Qazi Nurullah were now no more in power. Most of them had died or left the court. Remember that Qazi Nurullah Shustari had been sent to Kashmir in order to assess the revenues, the siyurgal, and the grants, the mansabs of the jagirs of the high nobles. And naturally, he had, in fact, antagonized a number of Turani nobles who had been involved in the frauds out there. They were probably looking for a chance, but they could do nothing against Qazi Nurullah Shustari till these powerful Iranian element in the Mughal nobility was present. It was only after the supporters of Qazi Nurullah were not there in the court that they could gather the courage to take action against Qazi Nurullah, and on one pretext or the other, they got him executed. In fact, whether it was the influence of Sheikh Ahmad or not, it is difficult to say. Probably they assumed this. The supporters of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi, just like in other cases, tried to acquire one, episode to show the influence of their saint, whereas it was never an influence which due to which the execution of Qazi Nurullah had taken place. The last episode, which I would like to discuss with you, although much time has passed, but still one of the last thing which I would like to take up before we end with Jahangir, is the arrest of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi himself. जहांगीर बेचारे इतने मजलूम हैं कि जैन भी और सिख भी और हिंदू भी और यहाँ तक के शिया, अभी मैंने पूरा जिक्र किया, और यहाँ तक के सुन्नी भी उनको अक्यूज करते. It was Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi was arrested in 1619 on the orders of Jahangir. Once again, if you read Tuzuk-e-Jahangiri, it is written that he had opened a dukan of dissension. एक ऐसा उन्होंने फसाद की दुकान खोली हुई थी जिसकी वजह से he was punished. That is what Jahangir writes, जिसके बारे में कहा जा रहा था कि सारी चीजें जो कोर्ट में हो रही थी वो शेख अहमद की वजह से हो रही थी. In 1619, he himself was arrested and put in jail for around 1 full year. Khaliq Ahmad Nizami, Professor Khaliq Ahmad Nizami, in one of his books, wrote that the arrest of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi took place under the influence of Noor Jahan Begum. एक बगैर कुछ रिलीजियस एस्पेक्ट लाए हुए कहने का मतलब ये था कि क्योंकि जब काजी नूरुल्लाह शूस्तरी के एग्जीक्यूशन के बाद नूर जहां की शादी हुई, नूर जहां एंड द क्लिक वाज शिया क्लिक, आसफ खान, इतबारुद्दौला, they were all Shias, and so suddenly when they came to power, they started conspiring against the Sunni theologian in the court, and it was under their influence that Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi, in other words, the arrest of Sheikh Ahmad is also interpreted as a sort of a religious discrimination, again put at the head of Jahangir. Why did this arrest take place? Now, very interesting information on this aspect is thrown if you read the article of Professor Irfan Habib, which I had cited in one of my earlier lectures as well. The political role of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi and Shah Waliullah of Delhi, which Irfan Habib had written. In this article, he points out that the first volume was brought out in 1617. It was brought out in the public view in 1617 from jail of Jahangir. And if you look at both these, volumes, there is much difference in the views expressed by Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi. If in the first volume, Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi is found to be speaking against the Shias and the Hindus, if he finds every fault in the Shias and the Hindus, incidentally, both the Shias and the Hindus were very much there in the court of Jahangir, the Rajput nobility and the Iranian nobility who were there. And he was speaking against that. But then after his arrest, when the second volume was released, no such letter now survives, जिसमें कोई दूर दूर तक भी which are included. So something, possibly Irfan Habib is trying to argue that the arrest of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi was not on the basis of religion, but on the basis of the fact that he was writing against the Rajputs. He was writing against the Hindu nobles. He was writing against the Shia Irani nobles. And that is why he was given an inam. And after he received an inam, after he promised that he would now lead a well-behaved life, the volume 2, which Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi came up with, was all sanitized, and no such views which were expressed earlier are mentioned. But the pretext which Jahangir took in punishing Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi was not these letters which he wrote against the Hindus and the Shias, but he picked up one special letter where Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi had tried to position himself above the caliphs and above the Prophet. In one of his, letters where he describes a dream which he saw, and he wrote to his preceptor Baqi Billah. In this, he writes that once I saw a dream that I was being taken by the angel to meet God. I reached a place in heaven where there was a big house, a big mansion. I inquired from the angel, whose house is it? I was informed it is the house of the fourth caliph, Imam Ali. I stopped, but the angel asked me to go forward. So Sheikh Ahmad went further and reached a spot where there was another mansion. This mansion was that of the third caliph. Again, he was asked to go further. He reached the mansion of the second caliph. Ultimately, he reached the mansion of the first caliph, and still he did not stay back. He was asked to go further. He reached the position of the Prophet himself, and he was again asked to go further beyond to reach and meet God. And this letter, in a way, tried to position Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi, Mujaddid al-Fisani, as someone who could get more close to God than the caliphs themselves, or to more close to God than the Prophet himself when Prophet went for Miraj. And it was on this that there was much objection. And it was this letter which was recognized by Jahangir and picked up for reprobation. The pretext of punishment of Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi on the fact that he was writing against the important nobles of the court, the pretext was on the basis of the fact that he had tried to take up the position of the Prophet of Islam himself. The Mujaddid, he tried to position as equal to that of the Prophet, who was more qualified to reach the level of God than the caliphs of Islam had ever been. And it was on that basis that Irfan Habib says, on the basis of this letter, that Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi was punished, and that is what Jahangir writes in his Tuzuk. In fact, Jahangir mentions this particular letter at the time when he mentions the punishment which he meted out to Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi. Look at the insolence of this man, that he's trying to elevate his position to a position more than that of the Prophet and the pious caliphs. And it was on the basis of that punishment was given to them. In short, to now conclude my lecture, Jahangir is one of those who is, although, professing the same type of religious distancing that Akbar did, equidistance, चाहे वो शिया डिवाइन रहे हों, सुन्नी डिवाइन रहे हों, सिख डिवाइन रहे हों, जैन धर्मी रहे हों, सबको उसने एक ही अंदाज में, जहां वो डिजर्व करते थे पनिशमेंट, उनको पनिशमेंट दिया था. In other words, we can conclude and say that actually Jahangir was as secular, as equidistant from all religions as Akbar had been. The only difference between Akbar and Jahangir was that Jahangir had the misfortune of being misinterpreted by almost all the faiths who came into contact with him. Thank you.